What's up, everybody? This is my face third. Man, my brain is seriously tired today. This is my third Facebook Live today, and I think I'm gonna go for 4. So RK, if you're watching this, man, we should probably have a competition. Do you like how I only choose to compete with you when I'm already producing a lot of videos? So I'm just joking. We don't need to compete. That one day was a lot of fun when I beat you, and I did create like 7 videos, and you went to bed thinking that you had won because you had created 5. I beat you, bro. I beat you. And I appreciate your public confession that I beat you as well. So, yep, this is the third Facebook Live for today. I'm almost home, and if you haven't liked our Facebook page yet, please do that. We're going to be pushing all this content over to that page, fb.com/thejimjessbaker, fb.com/thejimjessbaker. Please go like that page. But yeah, I want to talk to you guys about prophetic words. Prophetic words. There's a line of thought in some churches that God stopped speaking because the Bible is the final authority, that there is no more God speaking today, and I don't agree with that, obviously, since I volunteer and am part of a tribe and an organization called YWAM, which is based on hearing God's voice and obeying, hearing and obeying. So I still believe that God speaks today, and I mean, it can get a little weird, right? You could hear other things as well. You could be making it up, the devil could be speaking to you, or you could be hearing God's voice. But I am not willing to not hear God's voice, because there's bad things that could happen, right? Because when we hear God's voice, that's a really good thing that's happening, especially when we obey. And I have crazy, amazing testimonies of hearing God's voice and obeying and having crazy, cool things happening. So might as well just share one of those testimonies. I think this is my best hearing from the Lord testimony. This one's nuts. So 2008, I just finished my school of photography in Kona with YWAM, and it was my first journey into support raising. And I remember just being like, I don't want to ask anybody for money. Who wants to ask people for money? Like, YWAM is a completely volunteer organization, so no one gets a paycheck from them. And so you're required, everyone is required all around the world to raise their own funds through personal fundraising. So I was just like, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this well. I came up with a budget. Here's the set budget that I would like to have, so that I'm not living in poverty and unable to do things. I want to actually be able to live, you know, not crazy affluent life, but I want to be able to have some comfort so that I can really focus and do this well. So I came up with a budget and set that up and said, you know, here's an amount of money that I would like to be able to fundraise for. And I remember sending out an email, and one person responded and said that they would support me X amount of money a month, which was awesome. But I realized that that wasn't even going to fill up my gas tank once a week, and that was just like a once a month gift. So I was just like, oh gosh, this is going to be nuts. So I ran into a buddy of mine named Phil Cunningham, whose wife was in my school of photography at the time, and he had a family. He had 2 kids at the time, I think, and he had been support raising and doing it for a while and was raising a family in YWAM. And so I just asked him, you know, hey man, tell me the secrets to support raising, because I don't want to do this. And he said, you've got to ask people for specific things. And I was like, heck no, I'm not asking people for specific things. I don't want to ask people for money, much less something specific. So that night I'm going to bed, and on my list of things was a new computer, since I was going to be staffing a digital photography school. And I wanted a new MacBook Pro. I wanted some photography software. I think the total package of it was going to come out to about $4,000 or something like that. And you know, that was the first thing that I crossed off my list when I realized, man, support raising's hard. This is going to be nearly impossible. So I crossed that off my list. But as I'm going to bed that night, I remember rolling over and just kind of getting ready to go to bed, and I felt like the Lord spoke to me, and it wasn't like an audible voice, it was just the still small voice. And I felt like he said, call this specific person. He gave me a specific name and said, ask them to buy you that computer. And I was just like, that's nuts. I'm making this up. I don't even think I'd make that up. Who wants to ask someone for that amount of money anyway? And so I'm just like, I must have eaten something bad. I don't know what's going on. So I rolled over and was just like, I'm going to bed. And I hear it again, still small voice. Hey, Jim, call this specific person, gives me a specific name, and asks them to buy you this computer. And I'm just like, this is crazy. I hear it a third time, and I'm just like, you know what, God, we'll deal with this in the morning. I'm going to bed. So I go to sleep. And the first thing when I wake up in the morning, I hear it again, still a small voice. Hey, Jim, call this specific person and ask them to buy you a computer. And so I got up. I was just like, I'm going to be obedient. I feel like this is what the Lord's saying, and so I'm going to hear and obey. And so I made this phone call. As soon as I got up, I got the person's voicemail. Super excited I got their voicemail because I didn't really want to ask them in person. And my voicemail was something like, hey, such and such, I'm going on staff with YWAM. We've got to raise our own support. I'm going to be on staff with a photography school. And I feel like the Lord's asking me to ask you for this new computer that I'm trying to get and a whole bunch of photography software. The total price is $4,000. Would you pray about it? Thanks, bye. You know, and I hang up and I'm just like, you can't take voicemails back. You cannot take voicemails back. Like, that's there and they're going to hear it. And I just, in the pit of my stomach, just feel like, what did I just do? That was the dumbest thing I've done. So I had to go to class, and on break, I saw that I got a voicemail. And this person was just like, hey, Jim, I got your message. Could you call me back, please? I think the person even said, like, I'm a little confused about your voicemail. Could you give me a call back, please? And I was like, oh, no. Oh, gosh. So I called them back, and I got in touch with them, and we're talking. And the person just said, you know, just like, can you say what you said again? Can you explain it again? And I said the same thing. You know, I feel, you know, we're going on staff with YWAM, got to raise our own support. One of the big things that I need/want is a new computer and some digital photography software. Would, you know, the total cost is about $4,000. Would you pray about, you know, praying about giving this amount of money, because and I'm just trying to be obedient. I feel like that's what God's saying. And they said, hey, I was actually praying for you this weekend at a retreat on how I could support you, and I felt like the Lord kept saying the number 4 to me, but I had no clue what that meant. For what? And as soon as you asked for $4,000, I had an absolute peace about it. Where can I send the check? Nuts! Huh? Right? So that's a story right there of both of us hearing from the Lord and obeying. Pretty stinking crazy. So, but I want to talk about prophetic words. That's one of my favorite testimonies about hearing God, provision, support raising, and things like that. So last night I was hanging out with my buddy RK, and I love this guy. He's an inspiration to me. He recently posted something on Instagram that said something around like, if you're not inspired by the friends you're hanging out with, then that's not freedom, that's a prison cell or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And I'm pretty inspired by RK. So RK pulled into the driveway to get me and immediately goes over to the worship night and is laying hands on some guy that had broken his ankle and is praying for healing. And so the guy didn't get healed, but I just love that that was RK's first desire, to get in there and pray for the sick. I want to see Jesus heal people. So that's awesome and inspiring. But he showed me a video last night of Lou Engle preaching at the Send and using the word hurl. He pretty much just says that our translation of that verse that says you pray that the Lord would send workers into the harvest, that the word there is really beg. I think maybe King James says beseech. I don't know what that word is now that I think about it. And so it's really like beg the Lord to catapult or hurl, I think is the word, hurl workers into the harvest field, right? And that's a pretty convicting word. How often do we pray that? Jesus told us to pray that. And how often are we praying that workers would go out and do the work? I think that's what I'm on earth for. I think that's what I'm realizing. That's why I changed my Instagram tag to inspiring and equipping world changers, right? I want to tangibly equip. I'm driving in circles right now, if you didn't notice, because I was almost home, but I want to keep driving. I really want to equip the next generation of world changers. and people that are fired up and ready to take the gospel. I think that you can be fired up, you can be inspired, but you can have no clue what to do. And I think that since I have been in YWAM and out of YWAM since I was 18, and the people from my DTS, when we did this, how many ever years ago, how many of those people are still walking with the Lord? How many of those people are still passionately walking with the Lord? How many people are still set on fire for missions? How many people have gone overseas to the mission field? Kim, I see that you're watching. We've got one friend that has, and that's amazing. So are we praying that we would hurl workers into the harvest? That's a great question. So, Prophetic Words, I prayed for RK last night and told him what I felt like the Lord was saying prophetically, and prayed for his wife as well. And then he just said that he really felt like I was going to hurl workers into the mission field, into the harvest field, in a unique Jim Bakker way. And I feel like that's what the Lord has really been speaking to me recently as well, and that's stuff that I'm gearing up to do. But with Prophetic Words, right, if someone else is hearing from the Lord and gives us a message, what are we doing with that? Are we taking ownership of that message? Are we doing something about that? Or is it just something nice to hear? And I think a lot of times in our lives, we hear things from the Lord, or we hear a prophetic word and we love getting it and it makes us feel good, and then we don't really do anything about it. And so are we taking ownership of the things that we feel like God is saying in our life? And are we acting on it? Are we doing it? Are we planning? Are we taking action? Are we setting that word before us as something that God wants to do in our lives? And are we realizing that He said it, He designed us to do it, but we have to do the work? That God has called us, but He's not going to do it for us, right? So, yeah, I don't know what the Lord's spoken over you, things that you carry in your heart, specifically things that other people have come up to you and just out of the blue, they don't know you, but all of a sudden they're reading your mail, they're saying things, they're speaking forth the deep things of your heart that you've never told anybody, things that you've just heard the Lord whisper, and then somebody else is walking up to you and telling you those things, right? Usually God's probably doing that as just a confirmation or a affirmation to us. And then are we taking ownership? Are we taking the next step on that word? So that's my encouragement to us today. What are we doing about what God is saying? Are we hearing and obeying? Are we taking action? And are we praying? Are we begging? Are we beseeching the Lord? Is it beseech or besiege? Comment and let me know. It's got to be beseech, but that's such a weird word. Are we asking the Lord to send workers into the harvest field? Right? And that's what's so interesting about modern America and parenting. We'd rather have our kids go and go to college and have a successful job, instead of taking pride in sending our kids to the nations to preach the gospel, to have people change the destiny of people's lives, change the destinies of nations, change and alter the course of history through the gospel of Jesus Christ. So there it is. Ask the Lord to catapult, to hurl. I think it was the word hurl. I think I was the one that used catapult. Same thing, right? Launch, throw. Come on. Woo! Getting so fiery in here. I just dropped my phone and I have no clue where it is. Good thing I'm almost at a... Man. That's intense. I think I'll stop now. I've got to fix my suction cup. Anyway, all right. Honor the words the Lord has spoken in your life. Do something that God sends workers.